Hey everybody, it's Dana and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be playing with products from the Altenew February 2024 release, and I'm going to be making two cards for you today. So let's go ahead and get started. So for my first card, I'm going to be using the Sunset Horizon stencil, and as you can see, this is a buildable stencil that you can make all these gorgeous designs with. For today's card, we're going to keep it very monochromatic and we're going to use sand dunes, rocky shores, mocha, and espresso for our inks today. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to bring in my stamp wheel here in a little mat, and then I can go ahead and set down my cardstock. Now, my cardstock here is Nina's Solar White 80-pound cardstock. And I'm going to go ahead and start with stencil number one. So there's two stencils number ones here. There's one that kind of covers up the top, and then there's one here that has the sunset. I'm going to start with that one. So I'll go ahead and press that down onto the grip mat, which is perfect because that's going to hold that in place. And then I'm going to start bringing in my ink colors. So I'm going to start off here with Rocky Road. And I'm going to start blending up from the line of the stencil. So from the mountain range per se. So I'll come in and start blending that color up. And I'm using most of the color on the stencil itself and then pulling the color up. So as you can see here, I'm building up that color and I'm also kind of putting in the mark where the sun is going to be. So this is going to not be my lightest color, but my second lightest color. I'll blend it all the way up to the top, and that's going to kind of like start the first part of this sunset. Again, I'm keeping this very monochromatic because I feel monochromatic colors are so pretty when you want like a really stunning card. So that's why I'm going to use the shades of brown today. Next, I'm going to come in with Espresso, which is going to be my darkest shade, and add that towards the top. So as I ink blend this on, I'm going to just be building up these colors. This is super, super easy to do. And the reason I kind of chose this color palette is because I need more masculine cards. And I do have my Valentine's Day card series going on. So I will make sure to link that below. And I'll also link it up here if you guys want to check that out. But a lot of the times, my Valentine's Day cards have more of a feminine kind of card style. So I will want to kind of adjust that a little bit this year and show you some masculine ways to make Valentine's Day cards. And they all don't always have to say I love you either. So I'll go ahead and pull up that. And as you can see, I have that gorgeous color blend across the top. Now I need to go ahead and start adding in some more color. So now I'm going to grab in the other stencil number one, and that's going to block off what I already did. So I'm not going to be adding any more color up there right now. I can push aside the darkest color. I will clean off my brush because it does have a lot of brown ink on here, as you can see. And then I'm going to go in with my lightest shade, which happens to be Sand Dunes. Now, I'll lightly come in with this color, but I want to just make sure that everything is lined up. Now, this stencil set is a little bit forgiving, so if you don't line everything up correctly, you're going to be just fine. Now, I'll come in with the lightest color, and I'm going to blend that in ever so lightly. So this now is going to give us that sun shape. So I am making sure to pull down that color just a bit because we're going to have that color kind of overlap with our stencil number two again. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this. I like that little arch I have going on there, but I'm going to deepen it up just a tad bit. I am going to stick with the same color, which happens to be that sand dunes, but I am going to pull that color down just a little bit more so it's going to overlap when we put stencil number two back on. All right, so I have that done. Now I'm going to grab in stencil number two, and there's an opening towards the top where the sun would be. And I'm going to grab some ink and add a little bit of color just so there's a little bit of a gradation from where there would be like, let's say, a shadow on the sun from my mountains. So put away that color there, and now I'm going to bring in my mocha, I believe this was, and add a little bit of that, and that's going to put in that line of where our mountains are starting. So I'm just slightly blending that up, and when I remove that, voila, now you see where my mountains are going to start. Now within the stencil, there is a little bit of an arch. You can't see it, but it's etched into the stencil. And that's going to help me line up, covering up the sun I just created. And it's going to work for me to start doing my mountains. I am going to bring in a piece of mint tape here just to block off the bottom part of my card. And now I'm going to start adding some more ink. I will go into my darkest shade, which is that espresso, and I'm going to start bringing that up from the bottom. So as you can see, this creates such a gorgeous card. And again, if you're not sure of what colors to use, go back to the pamphlet that's in the stencil set, and you'll be able to see a nice, beautiful color palette that you can use. But again, I wanted mine to be a little bit more on the masculine side and a nice monochromatic look. So look at here. When I pull that away, look how gorgeous this card is. I decided to go back in a little bit more with that espresso just to deepen up the top. Now the colors will blend once the ink starts settling in, but look how gorgeous this card is. Now remember, I have two cards for you today using this color palette, but I really, really love how this turned out. Now it's going to be time to add in that sentiment. So for my sentiment, I am using another new release from Altenew, and this is called Chrome Sentiments. And this is so pretty because it allows you the opportunity to add gorgeous color almost in like a gradient across your card. Let me go ahead and show you how. I'm going to first start off with my lightest ink color, which is going to be that sand dune. And I'm going to add that right to the top part of this. Now within this stencil, you're going to see that there is a break right in the middle of the word awesome. And this is going to allow us to get that gradient. So again, I want to start with my lightest color. I'm going to bring that in. And then all I have to do is shift my stencil. Now there is a little line right here on the stencil that's edged in, and I'm just going to move that line to the bottom part of where our awesome is and the UR is. You'll be able to see that in the stencil. So once I line that up, you're going to see now my words are coming together, but I'm going to be able to get a fantastic gradient. So for my second color, I'm going to use mocha. I am going to make sure to mask off the bottom of my cardigan so I don't get any ink where I don't want it. And then I can start blending in that second color. Because I shifted that stencil, it's protecting what I already did, which was my lightest color, and it's going to allow me to have such a gorgeous gradient on this. So I'll go ahead and blend those colors together, which again is a gorgeous monochromatic card here. And when I remove this stencil, look how gorgeous this gradient is. It is so pretty. I love this. Now I do want to go ahead and trim down my card because I want equal amounts of that sentiment to sit squarely in the center of the card. So I'll go ahead and remove this from my stamp wheel, and then we'll go ahead and trim this down. Now, I decided to use a craft card base just to stay with that monochromatic color palette. When I trimmed down this piece, I did it where I have a little bit of the craft poking on the sides of the panel. I'll go ahead and line that up, and look how gorgeous this looks. I love the monochromatic gradient on this. I did want to add just a few elements to this, not many, so I did want to add a little bit of an element here, but not too much. So I'm going to use some new enamel dots from Altenew, and I'll just place those around the UR of the sentiment. And by using my tweezers, that helps me get everything lined up perfectly. And we have our first monochromatic card for today. Look how gorgeous that is. Now we're going to move into another card using another stencil from the release. So this stencil that I'm going to use for my second card is called the Modern Circles Builder Stencil Set. This is also a new one, and I love this stencil set as well. So this has 3 stencils here when you can build up a gorgeous design. These are all 6x6 stencils, by the way. So I'll go ahead and line that up on my card. And I love being able to use the grit mat here that's in my stamp roll because it keeps everything in place nicely. So my first color today is going to be that Sand Dunes, which is going to be the lightest of the color palette. And I'll go ahead and start blending this in all over this first layer of the stencil. Remember, there are, I believe, 3 layers here. So I'll bring that in, kind of coming it in very soft with this and tapping off any excess onto that grit mat. And now since we're done with that first color, I can go ahead and pull off this stencil and look how pretty this is building up. All right, next we need to go into our second color and our second layer. All right, so our second stencil has like some etched lines in here, and you'll be able to see that hopefully when I tilt the stencil. And this is going to line up and cover up those first arches that we did. So once I have that lined up, and you can kind of see where it is in the stencil of where you need those tops and bottoms or sides of those arches to kind of line up. I'll go ahead and press that down and move into Mocha. This is going to, again, give me a really pretty color palette here. And this I love because this is a very modern design. So once again, I'll go ahead and start ink blending this down all the way across the card panel. Now, when I lift this up, you're really going to see this design start coming to life. Look how gorgeous that is. I could actually leave it here and not do the third layer, but we're going to use the third layer today. So I'll go ahead and grab that third layer. I'm looking for the parts that are etched in that gives me like that little bit of a guide. But again, you can look through this stencil and you can kind of see where things lined up. It's very, very easy and it's really, really forgiving. Once I have everything lined up, I can go ahead and press this down and bring in my third color here. So I'll move the mocha out the way. And then for my last and final color of blending is going to be that espresso. One more time, I'll grab my blending tool and go ahead and blend this through the rest of the card. This to me is the best part is when you do the peel and reveal. Look how gorgeous this color palette looks. It looks totally different than our initial card, right? Because this is a very modern look and it's so pretty. So let's go ahead and put a sentiment on this. I'm using the Sunny Sentiment, also from this release from Altenew. And I know I want this to be a masculine Valentine's Day card. So I'm going to choose one that shows a little bit of love. So once I have that picked out, now mind you, this comes with, or I shouldn't say comes with, you can buy the additional dies. And again, you guys know me, I don't like fussy cutting that much anymore. So I highly recommend it getting the dies. But again, if that's not for you, that's totally fine. You can stamp this on a card and not have to worry about having the dies. But I knew I wanted to pop this up, so that's why I have the dies. So I can go ahead and press that down in my Misty. And I am going to make sure to kind of rub my hands over this so I can get a little bit of good of impression. Now, when the stamp site comes, they kind of have like a residue from the manufacturer, and you can kind of use your fingers to kind of scrub that off. Now, for my color, I'm using the Rocky Shores here. This is my like kind of medium shade that we did the ink blending on our first card. So I decided to pull that color in since it's not one of the colors that we ink blended with. So I'm going to stamp that twice just to get that a tad bit darker. Now I can go ahead and close down my Misty lid, tap across that sentiment, and we're going to have a gorgeous sentiment. But remember, we did a lot of gradient ink colors here and a little bit of a gradient from our other card. So I decided to do a little bit of a gradient on this. I'm just going to use what is left on my brush from all of the ink blending, and I'll just put that towards the bottom. And that's going to give us a little bit of a color shift within this sentiment. I felt that that was a little bit too light, so I am going to go in with that espresso. I'll tap it across the sentiment, and then I'm going to grab my blending brush, and I'm also going to grab a paper towel and just kind of wipe off the top of that so it can kind of be split like our other sentiment was on our first card. Now this makes a very harsh line, so I'm going to come back in with my blending brush and kind of soften that up a little bit. And then when I press down, you'll be able to see I have a little bit of gradient on this sentiment. I think that just looks so pretty. Now we can go ahead and set this aside. I will grab the matching dies and I will go ahead and die cut this. Now I did go ahead and die cut this out several times so I can give this a little bit of weight on my card. Now, if you don't want to do this, you could totally use foam tape behind this. But again, this is a great thing about having a coordinating dies is that you'll be able to stack up your sentiments when you die cut them. And it's really, really easy when you have the matching dies. So I'm going to go ahead and glue these together just to give, again, that sentiment a little bit of weight. Now, I did trim down this card panel just like I did the other one. And we're going to go ahead and give this the same card base. So remember, I had the craft card base that I used on the first card. And I just start pulling in that little bit of a lighter brown, really works perfectly as a card base. So just make sure that I have my card base set up the right way. Now I did trim this down so I had a little bit of that cardstock or that card panel peeking out all the way around. Remember before in the other card, you just kind of saw it on the sides. Now I can go ahead and add my sentiment on top, and we have two beautiful, perfect monochromatic cards for masculine cards for Valentine's Day. And look how gorgeous this is. Now you can always use the pamphlets that are in the Altenew stencil sets to get a great color palette, but I thought this was just such a perfect way to kind of have a seamless card in the same colors, and nothing competes with this. Everything just works seamlessly together. Now I'm going to put a weight on here just to kind of hold that into place for a second. And then remember those enamel dots that we used earlier. I'm going to put a few of them on this card as well. Now I did decide to use some of the bigger ones and the smaller ones, but I didn't want anything really to compete too much with what we have on our background. Alrighty, everybody. So this is our second card for today. Let me bring in the first and look how gorgeous this looks. I will have all the links to all the products linked below like I always do, and you guys can do a little bit of shopping. All right, that wraps up the card making today. If you want to see more videos from me, you can click on its videos here. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.